Just
Beloved,
connecting.
I'm giving you TikTok auntie right now. I'm very much giving auntie right now.
Oh my goodness. It is so good to see you. It is so good to see you. I tell
How
you.
are you, beloved?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing
Yeah.
pretty good. Today was a kind of a gloomy day in Chicago, so it was low energy. So
So,
I want to open by talking about just a little bit about what this book meant
okay.
and what it did for me, as a way to just get people, I
Yes,
guess,
let the
familiar with
people
some of the
know,
things.
beloved.
So this book centers Black women, right? It centers Black women and femmes, and it speaks directly to Black women in a way that makes those who are outside of that identity still glean and learn. And I feel like it challenged me to see how the work could be liberating to me, right? As someone who's existing outside
Mm,
of the center.
yeah.
We're typically used to reading work that centers white male perspectives everywhere that we go, in school,
Mm-hmm.
in church, etc. Our theology centers that. So to
Mm-hmm.
read theology that not only uplifts Black women, but also centers Black women and centers Black femmes as well,
Yeah.
was really um, it was refreshing. It was
Mm.
refreshing.
That's
It was
such a
really
good
refreshing.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
when you center the healing of Black women and femmes, everybody else is going to get healed too. That's just the
Exactly.
way that it is. And, I was talking to a white man yesterday, and he's like, I know I'm not your target demographic, but just because you're not my demographic doesn't mean that you can't read the book, right?
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, the Odyssey wasn't for Black women. To
Hmm.
Kill a Mockingbird, Great Expectations, those were not written for Black women, but I still had to read them.
Hmm.
Right. And
And
so
you still have
now,
to bring your experiences to these texts and try to find
right.
meaning for you.
And I also had to contort myself in a
Hmm.
particular way to approach the text. Here, when you're not centered, it's a way for you to say, okay, how can I play? How can I expand my viewpoint and let
Hmm.
me see what's going on in the text that also applies to me? Because when you're writing about liberation, everybody's story is going to be a part of that.
Exactly. Exactly. I really feel like too, by focusing on the theme of sensuality, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're taking what is the most taboo topic really in the church, the thing that we don't touch, the thing that we're supposed to know it exists
The
and not talk
sex.
about it. You're taking the most taboo topic in the church, right, and breaking it down in a way that makes you not only rethink about sexuality and right and pleasure and all these different things.
Yeah.
You're really rethinking you're rethinking a lot of things. It's all layered.
Yeah.
It invites you to bring a, like as you describe, a hermeneutic of suspicion, right? Being curious about what the text is trying to say, about the
Mm-hmm.
context of the text, about who the text was being written for, about what it means in our lives.
Yep.
um, so by centering the taboo thing, right, you're kind of forcing us to step outside of our comfort zone, right,
Mm-hmm.
into this space. And I think it really opens us up to reimagine a lot of different things and ask questions about a lot of different things.
Thank you for that. Here's the thing. So the Sensual Faith is written for Black women 18 to 45, currently or formerly churched. And even if you don't consider yourself a religious person, chances are some type of puritanical ideals have shaped your life's formation and your social norms and conditioning and things like
Hmm.
that. And so for me, I'm honoring the fact that people are having sex.
Hmm.
Black women and femmes, Black men, folks, Black Christians, what we're having sex, we're just not talking about it. And that's really,
Yes.
really dangerous, because I'm a body and sex positive pastor, because in order to talk about sex, we have to be talking about bodies. And in order to
Hmm.
talk about bodies, we have to remove stigma and shame around it. So even just saying the anatomically correct names for body parts,
Yes.
right? That I am talking about changing a culture so that we can even get to the sex. Sex is
Yes.
great, sex is good, but we have some baby steps before we can even get there.
There's a lot of layers that we have to go through before we can even get to the
It's
bigger
a
topic.
fluffy biscuit, honey, and it's just layer after layer after layer.
It's crazy, and you peel it back so well. Like you talk about everything from like just our discomfort around menstruation, for example, that being just a common thing that every woman that we know
If you
experiences
have a
typically.
healthy functioning system,
Yeah,
every 25 days.
yeah. So, but we kind of create this culture of disgust around it, where it's like we don't want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about it, we don't want to touch it, we don't want to hear it, keep it over there. We don't want to hear about your attitude changing because of it. And it's little stuff like that that you really peel back throughout the book, and that get us to really see how this is not only, it's not about just the preacher going up there and talking,
Right.
saying things. It's about a culture of normalization
Yeah.
and a culture that is patriarchal, a culture that
Yep.
does not like women or doesn't want
Right.
women to be heard or seen or
Right.
doesn't want to talk about the experiences of women.
Right. It's such a natural, magical, mystical process by which none of us would be here if it didn't exist,
Yeah.
right? Like that's
Yeah.
literally how you came to earth. And so for me, I'm like, if men menstruated, we would give a shit about cycles and sanitary napkins and things
Oh,
that we need.
and we
You
know that.
know?
It's very,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, it's really important that we see the ways that our culture has tried to shame and minimize women's bodies, women's and femmes bodies. And because many of us were raised in patriarchal churches, because we have typically male-centric language when we're talking about the divine, the image of the divine feminine, the idea that a woman or femme's body can be holy, that is new for some people. And so if you don't see me as bearing the imago Dei, if you don't see me as an expression of God, if you see me as cattle, if you see me as childbearer, if you see me as pleasure center for you, right? You're erasing my humanity. And if you erase my humanity, you're trying to diminish my divinity. And that's what I'm really expanding in the text, is that our humanity is divine. Our divinity is enfleshed. You can't separate the two.
And I feel like you talk about that through the difference between white evangelical white supremacist theology as compared to African traditional religions, right? So can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two and how they view body and flesh? I mean, flesh and spirit as compared to how it's viewed in African traditional religions?
Yeah, for sure. Like many folks, I was raised in a colonized Christianity. I grew up in a middle-class Caribbean American church. Everybody was from a Caribbean island. Everybody was Black except for Jesus on the wall, who was white with brown hair and brown eyes, right? Very problematic. And so growing up thinking about, we can't talk about the body, we can't talk about sex, and then getting older and going to a Pentecostal tradition, which interestingly enough has the most African retention within its demonstrative worship, but yet the colonized ideology reigned supreme. And so when I started to learn, well, first of all, let me back up. When I learned that Jesus was African, okay, that was really like the foundational shake and shift. I was like, well, Jesus was African. That means Jesus was practicing African spirituality, had an African mama, African aunties, was seeing African-ish. What then does that mean for my faith formation as someone who inherited a Eurocentric religion? So in ancient West African spirituality, African cosmology says there is no separation between what's quote unquote sacred and secular. For us who were raised in the colonized West, we have been very infiltrated by Plato, this Greek philosopher who was like body and soul are separate. And so it's the exact opposite, like the furthest you can get from African spirituality that says everything is holy. Everything is sacred. God is in Donnell. God is in the tree. God is in the waves, right? And so when I started to realize that the divine fingerprint, the DNA of the creator is in everything, including me, that meant that everything about me is good. And so that was the shift. So instead of running away from my sinful nature, learning, particularly the Yoruba tradition of Ifa, that there are principles that guide us, namely happiness and success and abundance are your birthright. I've never heard a sermon that said I'm supposed to be happy, that I'm supposed to be successful.
Wow.
So that was a major, major shift for me.
I was just going to ask because, like, we both come from, like, I grew up in a, Caribbean church. My family's from Jamaica.
You're Jamaica, right?
Yes,
Jamaican,
and right? we both have a grandmother named Norma. Norma is the woman who raised me, and she is the one who I would put right where you put Norma's name in your book in the dedication. Like that's where I'll put it.
That just made me so tender.
So like it really, I'm like, wow, like there's so
Wow.
many like layers and connections, and I'm thinking about like it's different when you're writing from about these topics, right? Having experienced and lived through those cultural, going through those
Yeah.
cultural experiences and
Oh
norms,
my goodness.
and so like what, and now you're here, and
And
you
now I'm
talk
here.
about this in your book often, like as was I, right? I also used to think this way. I also used to, exert these beliefs or hold on to this kind of a different, this way of theology that wasn't
Yeah.
serving me or my body or helping me to understand myself.
Right.
Um, how did you? What was the moment that initiated that? Was it the Jesus being African? What was there a moment that happened that?
No, so here's the thing. I like to liken it to, let's say there's a rock, right? And you've got a chisel and a hammer, and like Jesus was African, clink, right?
Hmm.
Like African spirituality is not demonic, clink. Like
Hmm.
womanist theology, clink. And it's just like all these chinks, and finally it just cracked open and was like, aha, here we are.
Wow.
So the
Wow.
moment that made me really think through what I'm doing, I was a student at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia.
Hmm.
I was dating a gentleman. He's in the book. His name is Art. We had been together for about 6 months, and I was in a theology and human sexuality class, which
Hmm.
didn't have any womanists on the
Oh,
syllabus, by the way.
of
I
course
was
it
like,
didn't.
how do you have a human
We know how
sexuality
that
class
works.
without any womanists? But anywho, the point is that I started to think, I really love this man. I can see myself with him for life. We hadn't been sexually active up until that point. But
Hmm.
I was feeling like shame around wanting to be intimate with this person who was so dear to me. And
Hmm.
so when I started to consider, do I really need to wait until we're married to have sex? That's
Hmm.
when I start, like, that desire to say, this doesn't feel bad. This doesn't feel evil. Like, this is the healthiest relationship I've ever been in. So
Yeah.
that had me start to say, well, what do I believe and what feels good and what's my ethic for my life? And that was when I was like, okay, we out here.
Yeah, because like you literally talked about like human nature, right? And the way that it's framed in the churches and spaces that many of us come up in is that human equals sinful. So your
Ooh,
human nature is literally
Chanel.
inherently sinful.
Oh,
And that literally distorts so much about how we that's the foundation that
it
informs how
is.
we operate about everything concerning our body
Yeah.
then.
Right.
Uh yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because I can think of all the times, I heard the heart is deceitfully wicked, and the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak, and in this flesh dwells no good thing. And I'm just like, we gotta pause, y'all. We gotta
Yeah.
pause and look at the text. Who wrote it? When did they write it? Why did they write it? Who picked over it and decided what we were going to keep, what we weren't? Who interpreted it?
Hmm.
Right? Like, the Bible was not created in a vacuum. God's self did not write the Bible and gild
Hmm.
it and send it to us. And so when we think critically, that's the first step, right? Is to not be a person of faith who thinks I need to accept doctrine and dogma as it's force fed to me, right?
Hmm.
The unlocking the idea that I can be an intellectual, faithful person,
Yeah.
giving you permission to say God, the divine source, light, universe, energy, whatever language you want to use, is big enough for your questions.
Yeah.
That's when we can get somewhere, because then you'll start to say, well, God, if I'm creating your image and likeness and you're good, how can I be evil?
Hmm.
So it starts with interrogation. And many Christians in particular, many people of faith, were taught to think that you cannot question God. You cannot question a sacred text. You cannot question spiritual leadership. And I'm here to say that I've been questioning all of these systems, and I'm
Yeah.
here. So you can do it.
And I feel like there's a way in which like how we come up in the church kind of there's a way that it kind of stifles the questions. Like I feel like we all have
Mm-hmm.
questions, right? We all have these questions, but
Mm-hmm.
and then I think about how when you're a child and you ask questions, right? Children don't get viewed with, respect or agency or
Mercy.
in the church. So when you have a question as a child, you're seen as disruptive, you're seen
Yep.
as,
A
problematic. You
troublemaker.
getting kicked out of Sunday school. You gonna go sit with
Yep.
the grown folks now because you can't. You don't know. But it's like if my human finite brain can fathom these questions, right,
Yep.
and ask these questions, why is it that the creator, the person who I'm supposed to believe created me, can't handle them?
Mm-hmm.
If I can handle them, if they're in my brain, they in my brain. That means
They in your brain. You are
I'm
expressing
asking them,
them.
I'm interrogating this thing. This doesn't make sense to me. And there's a way in which we have to turn logic off. We have to turn
Yeah.
intellectualism off in order to kind of continue in systems that oppress us.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? When you're in the West and you're trained to believe that everything has to be logical and linear, when you don't have an explanation, when you don't have an answer, I don't know, can feel disempowering for some people.
Hmm.
I believe I don't know is a valid answer. And there are too many spiritual leaders who are unaware of the power of an I don't know, right?
Hmm.
So rather than rushing to quote a scripture to be the resolve for a particular situation, why don't we sit with the grief, right? Why don't we sit with the pain, with the sorrow? My call in sensual faith is for us to practice embodiment as human beings. We are
Hmm.
spiritual creatures having a physical existence. And so why would we go through all of this transformation from the spiritual realm to the physical realm to not feel the physical? Why would the Christ figure come to the earth in a black man's body, in melanated flesh, melanated
Hmm.
male flesh, right? If not to express to us, you got to come and you got to be and you got to show up and you got to use your gifts and you got to fight for liberation and you got to live your life.
Hmm.
That's the message of the gospel. Come live, come love, come liberate. That's it. That's all.
And I feel like another element that you add to the Jesus narrative, right, is you make us interrogate and think about Jesus having a body. And that's one of my favorite like pieces, because it's like, if this is your theology, if your theology espouses that Jesus came, lived among earth as we did, right? That means Jesus had a body. That means Jesus
That means
had
Jesus had a body. That
he had
means
bodily
Jesus
experiences.
went through puberty. That means Jesus had a voice change. That means Jesus started to sprout hair. Maybe he had a sexy beard. That's my iteration of Jesus. Jesus urinated. Jesus defecated.
Hmm.
Jesus ejaculated.
Yeah,
Like, if you have to have all
that's
the
a fully human
conversations,
experience.
right? I
That's the full.
remember when my brother turned 12 and like he had to have that awkward conversation with our parents about wet dreams.
Hmm.
Jesus was 12 teaching in the temple, but Jesus was 12 probably having wet dreams, child. Like and I was talking to some podcasters about this and they were like, but you just don't think about Jesus like that. And I was like, why not? Like, because it's Jesus. And I was like, that's not an answer.
Yeah,
But it's a satisfactory, kind of
because of Jesus,
resolve
you
for
should be
people.
thinking about him like that, right? If you
Well,
believe
if
that,
we go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, if you believe that he embodied the human body and had human experiences.
Exactly. Then why are we cutting off? And that's the thing, right? Many of us weren't equipped with language, with assurance that we could talk about this thing and it would be okay. Right? If all
Hmm.
you hear is that your body is evil, sexuality is evil, if you have sex before marriage, you're going to hell. That's so troubling on so many levels because there are some people who had non-consensual sexual encounters, right?
Hmm.
Before they were married. There are people who are having
Yeah.
questions about what kind of sexual encounters they want to have. Like there are so many different stories that are not presented in the Bible that we need to see our lives as sacred text too. If we are going to, especially for my Christians who like this language around the body of Christ, you can't talk about bodies if you're not talking about bodies. Right.
I want to bring up this comment because
Yeah.
I think this is the kind of pushback that we get when we're having conversations about
Yeah.
these things. This person said Jesus went through everything, but we have to die to self and not
Ooh,
be who we
child.
are. So, like, again, this is theology that's telling you to die to your body. You can't
Mhm.
die to having a body.
Right.
That's not.
You can't. And that's the thing, right, Donnell, is that particularly when it comes to things like purity culture and like True Love Waits and Pinky Promise and all that tomfoolery.
Mm-hmm.
You are telling me to stifle what my body does naturally and God-givenly.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies are created with divine intelligence to be stimulated by particular stimuli, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we want it to be in consensual, ethical, pleasurable, healthy encounters. But the thing is, if I see Trevante Rhodes, right? And if my loins start to tingle, I'm like, oh my goodness, something is wrong with me. No, something is very right with me, right? And if I can, as a spiritual leader, get you in conflict with that natural divine urge,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be so busy being at war with yourself that you won't have time to smash the patriarchy. You won't have energy to confront sexism.
Oh my goodness.
You won't, right? Because you're
goodness.
you're tiring yourself out.
Yeah.
Boxing with
You're
yourself.
constantly at war. Yeah. And for no reason. You don't have to be.
And you don't have to be. Self-hatred fuels your oppression. Like you're doing the oppressor's work for you when you hate yourself.
Wow. So what keeps coming up, what comes through clearly in your work when it comes to sex and the ethics of sex and things like that? It's about consent. It's about safety. It's about ethics, right? It's about thinking about the ethical implications of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's your position, is that grown, consenting, safe, ethical, loving adults are free to do as they wish.
Period.
Right? And if there's no harm being done, the mark isn't being missed. Right?
Correct.
So I guess that's it. That's the tweet.
Right. No, well, here's the thing, because I wrote a whole chapter on it. Chapter 4 is called, But the Bible Says, Acknowledging What Church and Society Got Wrong. And I spent a good amount of time unpacking texts like Song of Solomon, aka Song of Songs, which has nothing to do with God loving the church or Jesus loving the church. Jesus wasn't even a thought, a twinkle in his pappy's eye, or his mama's eye in this case, right? In the text. Song of Solomon is about two grown consenting adults expressing and sharing and indulging in pleasure, sexual pleasure, for and with each other, to the point where even though that book is attributed to King Solomon because he just wrote a lot of shit back in the day, there are first person expressions of desire, lust, passion from an African woman. The idea that women aren't in the Bible and women need to be repressed, that are considered, second-rate entities in the spiritual community, is asinine. There's a woman in the text talking about my bosom is heaving, like my beloved, I am my beloved is mine, like. And so that tells me that even this idea of a biblical mandate around sex, it's been very cherry picked and completely misinterpreted and abused for the power of the structures in power.
Yeah, and that's the thing that constantly happens, right? With proof texting and people picking pieces apart and constructing a theology that makes sense to their worldview or that explain, but then you leave out an entire book like Song of Songs, right?
Because it doesn't prove your point.
Yeah.
Because quiet as it's kept, your gripes are likely your projections. When you are coming up with these theologies to bash and oppress and lord over other people, chances are it's because you're really trying to control something about yourself. And so once you start to liberate the text, you realize, wow, as long as you're not hurting anybody, like, you really are okay.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the naming of body parts.
Yes.
Because I feel like what kind of blew my mind, this shouldn't have, but it was really eye-opening to think about the very simple connection that if we don't talk about and name the body, we can't talk about the things that happen to the body. If we don't name the body, we can't talk about the things that happen to the body, good or bad. Good or bad. And this kind of contributes to cultures that continue to perpetuate abuse of women and of children in the church. Um, so can you talk a little bit about that and like the importance of naming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I talk about this in the book that I was at a multicultural, non denominational church in the Bay Area, and the Black male pastor was preaching a text around circumcision.
Hmm.
There's only one part of the body, the genitalia, that we're talking about when we say
Yeah.
circumcision. And the fact that he couldn't bring himself to say penis or anything like it, and in fact, said something to the effect of, and I would say the name, except there are children present, which adds another layer of problematic, right? Because
Yeah.
now you're teaching children at a young age that their very human body parts
That's right
are
there.
unacceptable, right? are
Yeah.
are to be shunned or left behind. And so you don't have a pee, you have a penis. You don't have a hoo-ha, you have a vagina, right? And I think if we just say the words and get used to hearing them and use them, it will become a natural fluent language, right? It's
Hmm.
kind of odd that while we're fluent in English, we're not fluent in our anatomically correct body parts.
Yeah.
It kind of can make people stutter and things like that. So it's important for us to be talking about our bodies. But if we can't name our bodies, how are we going to talk about what's happening to them? And that's where
Yeah.
the body positive part comes in. People want to focus on me being sex positive, but I'm also body positive
You can't
first.
be sex positive about without being body positive, as you mentioned in the
Precisely,
book.
Donnell.
Yeah.
Precisely.
And so like I feel like that was really eye opening because obviously it's a known fact. It's kind of a joke now. It's a joke that we throw around about people getting harmed and abused in church, right?
Mm,
Um, and that's the culture. That's the thing that we normalize, right?
mm-hmm.
But we simultaneously create this stigma around even talking about the body.
Right.
And I feel like that really opened my perspective and understanding about like why it's important because I feel like I would still even today if I was sitting in church and the pastor said
Mm-hmm.
that but there are children present I'll probably be like oh, okay that's understandable he don't want to
Right.
rock the boat he don't
Right.
want to have parents coming up to him at the why are you saying that up there and all this stuff um but why isn't it normalized why can't
Right.
we just say the words why is there this like
Right.
hesitation and this like and that just I think that's just indicative of the culture, right?
Yeah.
That we've created.
And Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas talks a lot about this in her book Sexuality in the Black Church, a Womanist Perspective. And she really gives us a socio-historic view of Black folks, enslaved Africans, our bodies being brutally, harmed and oppressed, and them not being our own. And so when you are a descendant of a people who had to disembody in order to survive.
Hmm.
And, in the words of Dr. Joy DeGruy, when we talk about epigenetics and how that trauma can be passed down, it's like disembodiment was a survival tool. But now that we are in a different age and time, we can heal ourselves. And as African descended people, we can heal our ancestors as well and say, hey, there is a new way to show up. I don't have to fear embodiment, right? I
Mm.
have agency. I'm safe, right? Which for Black folks on this land is a huge deal. And so it's more than what are you doing with your genitalia? Who are you lying in bed with? It's how do you feel in your body? Do you feel at home in your body? And if not, how can you unfold to that journey of coming home to your body?
Wow. And what I really love about the book, further promotion of the book that's right here, right, is that it offers at the end of each chapter prompts and reflections, affirmations that you can say about yourself and about your body.
Mm-hmm.
It offers like journal prompts and it
Yeah.
offers praxis. It's not just these, this is the ideas that I have and that make sense
Right.
to
And
me.
just talking at
Y'all
you.
go
Yeah.
figure it out. It's like, hey, I'm walking you through this experience of coming home to your body. These are
Yeah.
things
I'm a
that you can reflect
practitioner.
on. Yeah, go
I'm a
ahead. Sorry.
practitioner. I'm going to give you praxis. I'm going to give you theory. I'm going to let you think. I'm going to blow your mind, but I'm giving you information. And if you consent, you can sit with it, take what's for you and leave what's not. But I start the author's note. Hey, boo. Like I am very clear that I am talking to you as a co-facilitator, as a guide, as a sister friend, as someone who has been on the journey and is inviting you to walk alongside me.
Hmm. Um, so womanism is a just has been an important part of my spiritual journey and a part of my spiritual
Yes.
awakening. I share with you my mentor is
Dr.
Dr.
Joanne
Joanne
Terrell.
Marie Terrell,
Yes.
who's a womanist scholar and um, author and a bunch of other things. She's just a
Right.
phenomenal woman.
Love that for you.
But she said, and one of the things that I feel like this made me think about your book and you talking about experiences that you went through.
Mm-hmm.
She said, good theology begins where the pain is.
Ooh,
Good theology begins where the pain is.
Lord.
And I feel like that makes me think about when we theologize, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we theologize and we kind of circumvent our theology over
Yeah.
people's lived experiences and
Yeah.
over the things that they really went through, over the harm that they,
Right.
experienced at the expense of this theology.
Yeah.
Um, that is a disservice, right? It's a
Yeah.
disservice to the marginalized. It's a disservice to Black women.
Yeah.
So, um, you share about really vulnerable and personal experiences that you went through, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that what that me thinking about good theology begins where the pain is, right? Is that we can't ignore the pain. We can't
We can't.
ignore the harm that women experience at the
Yeah.
result of purity culture. We can't ignore the harm that men experience
Right.
at the result of purity culture, children, etc. Not just purity culture, right? Western Christianity, Western Eurocentric Christianity,
Yep.
non-liberative theologies.
Yep.
There's pain. Real people are impacted by these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a way that we are kind of, and we were in that space too, like where we're in church and we have these answers to these questions. We think we have
Mm-hmm.
all the answers. It was before I knew I don't know, right? It was because you
Accurate.
had every
Oh,
answer.
child.
Nobody could tell you nothing. This what's gonna happen here, and this, God gonna come back on this day and see this is the proof. Um,
Yeah.
I think that um, the book really opens us up to think about how do the things that we espouse, how do the theologies, what do our beliefs about God,
Mm-hmm.
um, how do they impact communities
Mm-hmm.
that we claim to care about, especially if they're ones that we say that we care about.
Yeah.
We say that we pro-black. You say this a bunch of times in the book. You can't be
Dying.
pro-black and anti. You can't be pro-black and you can't be pro-black and transphobic. Like
You
you,
can't.
you can't, right? So I really think that your book kind of proves that. It's
Oh.
it's it's truly womanist through and through in that it's like on every level you're really um, um, capturing womanist perspectives and you're
Mm.
really making us think about things in a womanist way. The questions that
Mm.
Black women be asking and have been asking, for it's Sojourner Truth asking. Back in the
Mm.
day, my professor would call her a proto-womanist, right? Before we
Mm.
coined this term womanist,
Right. Right.
there are
Right.
people who embodied these practices
Yeah.
and brought a suspicion to the text when they read
Yeah.
it, especially where they saw it wasn't lining up with their lived
Right.
experiences.
And I'm
Um,
deeply, deeply grateful for what Mona Hayder calls the intellectual lineage, right, of womanism, from Alice Walker to Dean Emily Towns to Marcia Riggs, Dr. Marcia Riggs, to now me and Ebony Janice Moore and Dean Michelle Guidry. Like, I am so elated to be a part of this fourth wave of womanism that is honoring the work of our foremothers and also dreaming of a world where Black girls and women and femmes can be free. Because if Black girls and women and femmes are free and safe and soft, you can best believe that your behind is going to be free and safe
yes,
and soft as well, right?
exactly.
So for me, it's about saying what heals my nervous system, what brings me unspeakable joy,
Hmm.
what is my pleasure, right? When Audre Lorde was writing about the use of the erotic, she was talking about how the erotic is not just for sexual power, but it's also for creative power. And
Mm.
so much of our creative power is tied to the creative essence of our sexual energy. And so the church wants to control women. That's just doesn't Black, white, multicultural, non-denominational, whatever. It wants to control women. But the thing is, if you're going to control women, you have to worship at the altar of patriarchy and power and domination and abuse. there's nothing good can
There's
come
no way
from
around
that.
it. Yeah.
Right. And so what I'm saying is, in order to co-create this world with us, you have to divest from patriarchal notions of religion. You have to divest from anti-blackness, anti-womanhood, ableism, homophobia, queerphobia. It all comes alongside. That's why I'm a womanist, because womanism will save us all.
Yeah. It's really that's the one thing that I really appreciate about the womanism is because like from that perspective, like you said, I think what people miss in that when Lyvonne says things like, or other black women have said things like, if black women can be free, it's
Yeah.
going to free. It's because black women, the intersections that black women have to experience and things like that, you're going to be considering nuances and layers and
Mm-hmm.
depths of the oppression that you wouldn't consider that,
Mm-hmm.
that we already passed this level when we talking
Right.
about, if we stuck at, white women, or if we're stuck at white men about what oppresses them, or what, if we get stuck at this level, we're never going to like look at the intersections that really are compiled layers of oppression upon black women.
Which, if we think about it, because Black women have been living at these multi-marginalized intersections, right? This matrix of systems of oppression, the fact that we are surviving is the medicine. The fact that Black women are now focusing to thrive in the
Sir
midst of all
thriving.
this thriving in the midst of all this chaos is evidence of, first of all, divine intelligence, but two, we know what the fuck we're doing. Like,
Hmm.
if you want to know which way to go, listen to a poor, queer, Black, trans woman, right?
Hmm.
Like, when I saw Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever, I was like, oh, I need to be listening to Shuri. I need to be listening to young, queer, Black girl scientists.
Yeah.
That's Afrofuturism right there.
I heard somebody put it this way. I think it was Trevor Noah when he was giving his thanks to black women as he exited his show.
Yeah.
He said black women taught him and nurtured him, and he said it's because black women don't have the luxury of fucking around and finding out.
He did say that. And I adore Trevor Noah.
Ooh.
Okay. Also, yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Trevor, if
Okay.
you see this, hey boo. Also, and I would love to see the day where Black women are not lauded for laboring and for teaching and hand holding, educating,
Mm.
and simply for being, simply for showing up, making you laugh, moving you with my voice, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And I think that's
That's real.
where we're at a breaking point right now, where it's like, do you want me for me, my person, or do you want me for my expertise? Do you
Hmm.
want me for my education, my educator skills? Like, I think as we're learning how to just rest, shout out to the NAP ministry, the NAP bishops,
Yeah.
as we're thinking about luxury and redefining softness, it's a controversial topic on TikTok, but Ebony Janice Moore is going to help us with that with her book, All the Black Girls Are Activists. Like, we're talking about simply reclaiming rest,
Yeah.
reclaiming our humanity, and understanding that we don't need to toil for our worthiness. We are inherently worthy. And when you know that on a cellular level, you talk to yourself differently, you allow people to treat you differently, and you just show up in the world differently.
Hmm. You're able to show up more in your power. Would you say?
In your pleasure, you're able to show up in your pleasure. It pleases me to be on TikTok live with you, right?
Hmm.
It does not please me to be in corporate America. It
Yeah.
pleases me to talk to Black
That's
women
real.
about loving their bodies. It does not please me to play the patriarchal, ping pong game of Black church politics. So showing up in my pleasure, I believe, is making my ancestors proud, because they did not have options like this.
Hmm. So, speaking of showing up in your pleasure, I want to move to some of the more taboo questions because
Okay, let's get into
Lyvonne,
it.
Lyvonne don't run from it. She show up to it. She's here
Okay,
for it. So we're gonna talk about it. So what is your ethical position as a body and sex positive preacher about consuming adult content?
Ooh, so here's the thing.
I'm
As
saying that word
long,
because we don't, they'll kick
right,
me
right,
off.
right.
But
As long as we know for a fact that folks are legal, that the actors
hmm.
are adults, that they consented to it, I think you can engage. Now, I will say, and I got this from Balesa, which is a brand that I partnered with some time ago. Like, pay for your explicit adult content, because chances are, if it's free, it's like on some male-centric, patriarchal, caricaturized expression, as opposed to like an intimate by pleasure, try pleasure. How many people there are, child? Like, everybody being pleased and everyone's pleasure being centered. It's a different form of media when women's pleasure is centered, and when that is the goal or the aim of the content creators, it comes across on screen differently.
Yeah.
So
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And the other question I was going to ask then is, because you talk about self-pleasure, I'm going to use that phrase.
Yeah.
So you talk about that in your book, right? And how it's a gift from God, and
Chapter
it's the gift
8.
that keeps on giving. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
So what I grew up in the space, right, where it's like that was frowned upon, like you said in the scripture, like masturbation, self-pleasure isn't mentioned anywhere in the Bible, right?
Right.
It's not mentioned anywhere in the Bible. People think that it is. People like impose in the same way that we read things into the text, like we read abortion into the text when the scripture doesn't say anything about abortion.
Right.
Like, people looked at all unethical things or sexual things that are unpleasing to God, and kind of lumped anything. Anything sexual into that. So I used to watch these poets, and they used to have T-shirts that said "ex masturbator" or
I
on their
used to
T-shirt.
wear those.
You used to wear?
I used to be a part of that.
No, you did not.
I performed a poem at one of their things in like 2010 or something like that.
Really?
Yes, I used to be hardcore, like out in the streets evangelizing, handing out fake tracts that looked like paper money. It was terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I did my track. I never wore the T-shirts though. I used to watch them because I came from a smaller, little church, so I used to just watch them.
Right. And then we found out the pastor was sleeping with folks in the congregation, child.
I didn't even know that.
You didn't? Oh yeah, that was like why the whole thing crumbled. Because again, people are having sex; they're just not talking about it. Like, there is probably a way that they could have had some kind of ethical setup. I mean, not really, because he's a pastor. He shouldn't be having sex with anybody in congregation. But it could be like, look, I want to be with this person. I got to go. I'm out. Right? Like, anywho.
But because they had to hide it and not talk about it. Yeah.
Right.
Had to hide it and not talk about it. So, yeah, I think that one of the best conversations you have, or things that you mentioned, is talking about the clitoris and how that's the only organ that is created for exclusively pleasure, nothing else.
Exclusively for pleasure.
And isn't that so, like...
Now you see why people will want you to be, to experience angst around your body. The clitoris is proof that God wants you to experience pleasure, sibling.
Alone.
Person. That's it. Alone?
Wow.
Alone?
Yeah.
Alone, whatever you want, honey.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I quoted this study about the Eve charity in the UK. They surveyed women, and they found that at least 60% of women can't name all of the parts of their vagina, their vulva, their reproductive system. And so if you don't know what it is or where it is or what it's called, there's no way you're going to know how to experience the fullness of it. And honey, when I tell you that there's so much pleasure when you just get to know your body. And then if you know your body, you can share your body at your discretion with other folks and show them how to please you as well, right?
Yeah.
Your wife wants you to know your way around her body, okay? And if there's shame around that, there's no conversation. There's like, when I remember I was dating a guy, a comedian. We had a great relationship because I'm hilarious. But I remember one time we had a lovemaking session, And afterwards, we were just talking about it. Like we were watching a football tape, like just like the replay. Okay, so what did you think about this? And how did you like that? And what was that? So, oh, do more of that next time. Okay, that's how you get
Those are the
better.
conversations. Yeah.
So, like, I'll close this part by saying that when you learn that sex is just for procreation and that sex is only for men's pleasure, you start to think that it has to be like a duty or an obligation as opposed to an experience. And the fact that the clitoris exists is proof positive that sex is for women's pleasure. I would say more than, but I will say as well as.
Yeah. Yeah. That's real. I feel like that was a really, again, these are things that aren't discussed and that you're not taught to read about. You're not, so it's like, that was really like a powerful point to me. I was like, so I guess one of the last questions before I invite, I'll take maybe two audience questions before.
Yeah, let's do it.
So if you have a question, leave it in the comment. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to pick 2 or 3 if time permits after this question. But we would love to know if you have any questions for Lyvonne. And make sure you get this book.
Yeah.
Make sure you get. See, I got it in my hand. This was gifted to me by the author, though. This was gifted to me by the author.
And you know why, Donnell? You know why I rock with you? And I wanted to say another word but the live. When I tell you straight Black men have been talking that good jibber jabber for the past 2 years. Thank you so much for your work. I appreciate what you're doing. When it came time to partner with me about this book, crickets.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're not really about that life.
Yeah.
Right? And so thank you for being a straight Black man that supports the full and total liberation of Black women and femmes. That's why you got a gift from me.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot.
You're worthy, beloved.
So like I said, y'all can throw the questions in. I don't see no questions yet. Don't play now. We sitting with a
don't play with it.
Award winner. We sitting with a published a legend.
You are so precious.
So stop playing with her. There's a way. I'm thinking about this because there's a conversation that is happening, that continues to happen, that continues to circulate about social media theologians and things like that. And there's a way in which they use that to kind of like diminish your credibility, your scholarly prowess, what you've done, the things that you've you're an expert in this field.
I have a Master of Divinity from Yale Divinity School and a Master of Theology from Columbia Theological Seminary, in addition to an ongoing spiritual practice and a community of elders and peers who, don't play with me. We out here.
At all.
And the thing is, you can tell from my citation game, right, that I know what I'm talking about, that I've read folks, that I'm still learning from people. And it's not just, the scholars in the academy. It's public intellectuals. It's podcasting. Because when bloggers. You decolonize, knowledge, you realize that there's an inner knowing in you, There are hunches, there are revelations, there are connections that you have that wasn't the Pythagorean theorem or some sort of formula that you studied in school, but you know that thing in your bones. And that sense of knowledge is just as important as the intellectual knowing and reading and studying. I would say it's more important because we do the head stuff really well. It's the below the neck that we got to start to really feel and transmute.
That's real. Because you do cite like a variety of different sources, and you not only the first, second wave, you onto the fourth wave already. You cite people who might be in the first wave, potential fourth wave people. So it was really cool to see all the variety of names and things like that you included in your work, and obviously that just provides more room for exploration and expansion. So I guess the last question I'll ask is, how, for someone who grew up thinking about the flesh and spirit binary, as disconnected, this is kind of the very common. Like, we don't really talk about it, but it's just implied. We talk about it sometimes, the flesh and the spirit, and you have to die to the flesh to live. And it's about this embodied this spirituality that is outside of yourself. You're going outside of yourself and looking for because you can't trust anything here. You can't
Ooh,
trust your body. You can't trust your heart because it's wicked. You can't trust your
mercy.
intuition, your gut,
Yeah.
because it could be the devil trying to be deceiving you.
Lord.
Um, so how do you? What advice would you give to someone who's trying
Yeah.
to move from that flesh and spirit kind of
Yeah.
combativeness
Yeah.
to a more inclusive,
Yes.
intuitive,
Yes. Integrated.
cohesive?
That's my
Yeah.
word. Integrated. Hey, Paige. So I am so clear that we need to do four things. One, we need to decolonize our Christianity. If you want to remain a Christian, that's fine. I need you to interrogate it. I need you to learn who, what, where, when, why, how, right? If you are an African descended person, I need you to deeply discern if embracing your African base and spiritual practice is right for you. If you are not African descended, I need you to look at what your foremothers were doing, the ones they was calling witches and shit like that and burning at the stake. What did they practice, right? Because there's going to be something there. The third thing is healing woundedness around our body. I know when I'm talking to
Mm,
women, particularly Black women, that woundedness is in the space. And so while it was not your fault that that thing happened, it is your responsibility to heal. And so having a sense of agency and say, you know what, I am worthy of wellness. I am worthy of wholeness. Let me go ahead and do what I need to do.
yeah.
Therapy, journaling, whatever you need. Last thing is to learn to love yourself unapologetically, because when you learn to love yourself, you choose yourself over and over again. And that's my invitation to readers. If you are a part of any school of thought that requires you to diminish your being, to hate who you are, to despise who you love, to
Mm,
show up in ways that make you feel smaller or less than, I define in the book and echo the sentiments of Reverend Dr. Mark Lomax that sin is separation from God. That's how I define sin. Sin is not a set of legalistic do's and don'ts, and you miss the mark and somehow you've fallen short. Sin is
hmm.
anything that blocks you from feeling the divine love of the Creator. And so for me,
Wow. Wow.
removing this blockage, that's the removal of the sin. Feeling like my body at 170 pounds, 5'10, stretch marks, fupa, fatty, all that is holy. What?
Hmm.
I walk different. I talk different. I
Yeah.
brag different. Like when you know, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
so that's
different.
what I really desire for us. And if, again, if Black women and femmes and girls get that, everybody else will get that.
Thank you. That was
You're
really
worthy.
that was powerful. So I'm gonna check the comments for questions.
I saw one
You can go
um,
ahead. Go ahead.
from True Freedom 79. She said, can you speak on being overstimulated from deconstruction from religion? Whew, deconstruction is a
Oh,
buzzword.
yeah.
And, we can nitpick and say, that's a very white word to use, right? Because I talk about this in the book that for Black folks, our ancestors did this fancy process called syncretism, right? Which means that I'm aligning and synthesizing all these different beliefs that feel good to me. So for me, I'm going to listen to gospel music, right? And I'm going to have my churchy moment, and I'm gonna practice yoga, and I'm gonna burn sage and incense, and I'm gonna pull tarot cards. Like, I'm synthesizing all the spiritual modalities that I feel help me to lead a life that is focused on joy and love and liberation. And so similarly to you, it could be going for walks in nature, it could be standing barefoot in your backyard, it could be engaging in plant medicine, right? Whatever natural urges you feel, your body is always talking to you. It's just that
Hmm.
in a capitalist industrialist society, projects and due dates and, gotta rush, rush, rush. When you pause and you breathe, right? And you're like, have I eaten today? Am I hydrated? Do I need a nap? Do I need to rub one out? Did I take my meds today? That's sensuality.
Hmm.
Sensuality is not about sex, right? And so deconstructing is less about tearing everything down, and it's simply shedding and releasing. Like, let me
Yeah.
just let go and go inward and see what feels good, and then come to the space with an eye of an ear of a heart of saying, what have I missed?
Mm-hmm.
Where was it not quite for me? What did
Wow.
I learn that maybe isn't quite true, right? And then integrate.
And I think you talk about a quote that you say often in your book is every body is different.
Mm,
And that
everybody.
lands, yeah, you separated at,
Yeah.
and I really think about how I think sometimes when people are leaving from a space where they are, from a church and they're coming into the
Mm-hmm.
deconstruction or whatever you want to call it
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
they're looking for leadership. They're looking for people to be like, this
Yes.
is what you need to believe. This is what you need to do. This is how you feel better. But I think what people really need to see themselves as the most important meaning making agents in their spiritual
Yep.
journey,
Yep.
right? You know what feels good to you.
Yep.
And you talk about being a possibility model, right?
Yes.
That you're not someone who's trying to tell people what to do. You're saying this is what I do, this is what works for
Yep.
me. This is I'm representation of what it
Yep.
could look like for you, but
Yes.
what feels great to me might feel bad to you. And
Yes.
if it doesn't feel good to you, then you shouldn't do that thing, right?
And I got that from Janet Mock, so we're going to cite her.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's the thing. It's an invitation. It's, hey, girl, friend, this is what worked for me, and this is what's bringing me joy and pleasure, and it might work for you too, right? So someone who says, that's good because I've struggled with picking just one. You don't have to pick just one. Either or thinking, binaries are byproducts of colonization, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you decolonize, liberate, when you liberate your religion, your spirituality, your faith, your belief system, you realize that I am a part of a both and system. I am a part of all of the above, all of the above, right? And so I am hopeful that this book will invite folks to see things that they love and enjoy as a part of their spiritual practice. That
Mm-hmm.
spiritual practices are not just going to church, reading the Bible, singing gospel. That cooking is a spiritual practice. That tending to your garden is a spiritual practice. That spending time with children is right. Like, what do you love? What do you love to do? Like, just think about that for a moment. If you're watching this and if there's a replay, right? How can you set an intention before you engage in that activity again so that you are being mindful, which is how I define sensuality as the ultimate practice in mindfulness, and just saying what transformative lesson or shift or rest, right? Because everything doesn't have to be, oh, I gotta heal in this moment. Some things can
Yeah,
just be,
yeah.
I get to enjoy this. I get to enjoy being a kid with these babies, right? Rolling around the grass and playing with the soccer ball. So yeah, it's just an invitation to play more, to honor the fact that we are experiencing life through our senses if everything's healthy and functioning. And that means that life is much more textured. And textures feel good. Think about silk. Think about cashmere. Like, who wants to go through life without silk? Who wants to go through life without cashmere? Like, who wants to go through life without colors? Like,
Yeah.
not being
Vibrancy.
ableist with folks
Yeah.
who see and, are visually impaired and things like that. But like, just breathe. And I'll close this part because I know, child, we said we could talk on and on and on. But
Yeah.
I'll close this particular part by saying that just like you have physical senses, you also have spiritual senses.
Mm-hmm.
And so for folks who feel like they have visions or feel like, did I just see something move in the corner over there? Or people who like hear tones in their ear, or people who like their hair stands up when they feel a presence. Like, all of these spiritual gifts that some of us were taught are demonic or evil, that is an extension of your sensuality and your spirituality as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so sensual faith has everything to do with body and not always everything to do with sex.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Um, I saw a question. This is, it's come up a few times, so I'm going to ask it.
Yeah, please.
Someone asked about what advice do you have for someone who experienced sexual assault at a young age?
Okay, so content warning, beloved ones. It's April. I know people are talking about it all over. So if this is not, if this is particularly alarming for you, you want to tap out, come back in, do what you need to do for you. So for survivors, the first thing that I want you to know is that I have a statement of belief. I say it as often as I can. And so I want you to hear me, beloved one. I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, and I believe you. What happened to you was wrong. It was not your fault, and there was nothing you could do to stop it or prevent it. And I want you to know that God is pissed about it. If your belief system includes the God, a higher power, your ancestors are pissed about it, and I'm pissed about it. And I want to start there because as a survivor slash thriver, I know how we can minimize or gaslight ourselves and think, well, it wasn't that bad, or he didn't mean it, or whatever we do in order to survive, whatever coping mechanisms we develop. And so, first of all, acknowledging that what you experienced was assault is the first step. Because I've encountered spaces with some women and femmes who minimize it as a way to say, well, it wasn't that bad, so that we can stuff it and move on. So when you are in a safe space, I would suggest talk therapy. I would suggest having someone in your life, a confidant. It could be a loved one. It could be a digital, companion who you feel like you can call and just share, right? Whatever you're feeling. And even before you get there, allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling. Part of the reason why I wrote Sensual Faith is because we live in such a busy culture that if we're ripping and running, sometimes we're missing the grief. Sometimes we're missing the lament and the rage. Even if we're talking about quarantine and all the things that we lost that were taken from us because of COVID-19 and the pandemic and sheltering in place, right? So when you're talking about something as deeply rooted and embedded in your flesh, in your mind, in your spirit, as sexual harm, well, now we're talking about the moment it comes up and you feel those warm tears welling in the back of your eyes, and oh no, got to do this presentation, nope, got to go to work, nope, got to pick up the kids, nope, right? I am saying you deserve space to grieve. You deserve and need space to lament and to rage. And so once you get there, yeah, everybody take a deep cleansing breath. You can start to engage your body in ways that feel good to you. So a couple of suggestions. If you have a bathtub, I love taking baths. The water just feels very cleansing and very healing, and it helps me to take time out to really check in with myself. The second thing that I love to do is dancing naked in my mirror. Some women are like, I can't do naked. You can do clothes. You can do your favorite swimsuit or workout gear or jeans, anything that makes you feel ooh la la, right? And really look at your body and speak life and honor that you have agency, right? And affirm your sovereignty and know that even though that person harmed you, they don't have power over you. You are sovereign. And I think that is a message that more women and femmes need to hear. And then the last part, of course, is self-pleasure, taking yourself out on sexy dates. And the same way you would prepare for a date, if you shave and exfoliate and put on a face and put on something cute for yourself, right? And take yourself to your couch or your papasan or your bed or a hotel for the night, right? Mm-hmm. And put on some sexy music and explore and touch yourself and see what feels good. So I know that's a lot. Whatever resonates with you, whatever made you kind of perk up a little bit and feel like I'm into that, that's where you go first.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Mal, thank you for asking.
And this is the last question. I know you got to go. You got a flight.
I know we're having a good time. We're having a good time.
But I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Dr. Brianna Boyd. And she's your therapist. Yes. And as someone who's in a amazing therapy situation, I've been with my therapist for 3 or 4 years. I know that it saved my life. I know that it changed my life. Wow. So I want to hold space here to talk about what therapy has meant for you, how long you've been in it, and why it's important, if it's possible, for you to do it.
Yeah. Therapy has been everything to me, and it hasn't always been that. When I was 19, I went to see a Catholic priest and I wanted to talk to him about some childhood trauma I experienced, and it was very cold and stoic and just not at all what I needed. And then when I was in undergrad, I went to the students like mental health services or whatever. And there were some PhD students who were getting their hours. And so they were the practitioners. And I was talking to a woman and it seemed okay. But then I had a really radical religious conversion experience. It got super saved and was like, I don't need therapy anymore. I have Jesus. And then like 2 or 3 years later, the rage came back. And I was like, oh, I need more than Jesus. So when I was in divinity school, I started a group therapy, a therapy group for women graduate students who were also survivors. And so that was the first time that I really got to like sit with other women. And I was like, oh, wait, talking does help. I do feel, okay, there's something to this, right? Mm-hmm. So then I'm giving y'all the whole tea. Then when I get to Columbia Theological Seminary, they actually had $300 earmarked for every student to help subsidize therapy. Oh. So I called Georgia Caring Counseling Center. I leave a voicemail. I'm like, hey, these are the issues. Let me know what's up. I get a voicemail from this white woman. I was like, what is this white woman about to teach me? And absolutely everything. The same childhood trauma that I experienced, she did. And the only reason why our relationship ended is because she got called to pastor. And it was in that moment that I realized that white women were not the enemy, but mm-hmm. that there are some white women who have done their work and are actually stepping stones on my own healing. Not that I was stepping on them, but like they would help me along my healing journey. Yeah. So once I opened up to psychotherapy, I was like, now I just need the right therapist. So, you know, I tried a Christian Black woman. I said something, Donnell, and she made a face and I was like, you're not the one. Yeah. So, and then I tried another woman and she was so divested from the church that it kind of felt like anytime I brought it up, it was like, yeah, of course, because that's just the church. And so it was like, I kind of needed a little bit of nuance. Yeah, like, you know, if I'm with it, I'm with it. And if I'm not, I'm not. I'm just never with it. Mm-hmm. So then here comes my sorority sister and she's posting on Instagram stories all of these gems, right, from her therapy sessions. And I was like, who is your therapist? Like, I need to know. So she sent me her information and I called her and we made an appointment. I put the time in the wrong time zone in my calendar. I'm going somewhere with this. And she was texting me, are you okay? 30 minutes into our appointment, I see her text messages and I call her and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. I feel so dumb. She was like, baby, sweet baby, it's okay. If you want, we can talk for the 30 minutes that we have. And she always points me back to that very first conversation because she's like, who you are now, night and day. Yeah. Now I'm like, child, I'm late. Oh, well, like,
yeah. It's stuff so far.
I'll close this part by saying that it has meant everything to me to have a Black woman. She's biracial, but she identifies as Black. Psychotherapist see me and say, we're not just doing therapy, we're doing God work. Like that right there made me know that God is even in therapy. Like, and that kind of transformative healing power is not just reserved for white people or people who are living with mental health challenges or any other of the, you know, problematic stigmas that we have in the Black community or that we're eradicating in the Black community. Let me use my language.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something about that experience of like you being able to track your growth in session. Like, it's the same thing. My therapist, whenever I like have a moment where I use one of the tools that she's given me over the years, or like when I like talk myself down out of like anxiety about something, or when I talk myself into my power and being like, come on, you know, like she just chuckles, like she's like, you know, I remember what things were, and look at you now.
Wait,
like I told my therapist. Go ahead.
Let me tell you the story. So I was flying Southwest, and you know, Southwest doesn't have assigned seating, and so you line up by the letters and the numbers in your order. And I was one of the A1 through 5s, which is like first class on Southwest, whatever. So it's like white man, me, white man, whatever. This white woman comes up to me and I'm on my phone and she was like, excuse me, what's your number? And like, Southwest requires you to be inherently collaborative, but I just was not feeling it that day. So I ignored her and she tapped me on my shoulder and I looked at her and I was like, don't touch me. And she was like, I'm sorry. I just wanted to know what number you were. So I told her my number, whatever. So I go to my therapist and I'm like, and this white woman came up to me. There are all these people standing around, all these white people. And she comes to me like I'm her servant, probably because I'm Black. And she was like, well, sweetie, didn't you say that you were surrounded by white men? I was like, yeah. She was like, well, white men are the most dangerous creatures on the planet. She was like, what if you were the safest person for her to approach? And I was like, oh, okay, well,
yeah.
Fine. So now, whenever I find something, I'm like, hey, I'm MA5. What's your number? Do you need help? Do you need to know a number? You know? And like when I say my number, people are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I learned that like that response was because I experienced racism at the hands of white women, but it was my responsibility to heal that thing. Not for her, but for me. That woman can be bigoted the hell out. Yeah. But if I approach every encounter bracing myself for that kind of experience, I'm going to stress myself out. My nervous system is going to be activated. My cells are going to be, you know? So I learned that I get to move through the world not taking on other people's shit, imaginary or realized.
That's real.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's been really, really helpful.
Well, I think we're as I was saying, session. I think we're at our time.
Hold on, one more, because Paige asked me, in addition to Sensual Faith, wink emoji, what books do you recommend and or have empowered, educated you? Okay, so I have talked about Sexuality in the Black Church by Kelly Brown Douglas. Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, by Adrienne Marie Brown and company. For my African cosmology, anything by the Somays. So Mali Doma, Patrice Somé, and his wife, Sabonfu Somé. I mean, they talk about ritual, nature, healing, community, just like really gorgeously. Redlit Theology, of course, by Candace Marie Bembo. And I feel like, All About Love by Bell Hooks. Okay, that's it. I think that's enough for y'all for right now.
Yeah. that was a good note to end on, too. Candace Marie Bembo.
I cite all the books.
You do. You cite all of them. Notes. You got a note section pointing them out.
Listen, I don't know what your process is going to be like, beloved, but when I started writing, I had footnotes. And they were like, man, we're going to do endnotes for you. Because I was like, okay.
Because it was too many citations.
We finna do endnotes, child. So,
I'm going to put that in the back. Because I feel like that will probably happen for me, too. Cause
I know. Have you started your draft?
I'm starting my book proposal.
Okay.
So Rochelle's on vacation, so she greenlit me to start the proposal. So. It's happening.
I'm so excited for you, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm so happy that you're my label mate.
Thank you so much again for taking the time.
You're worthy. Thank you for having me. You know,
it was amazing.
I'm such a big fan of your work, and I'm so grateful for your life and you and Rose.
Likewise, I'm glad I found you. I'm glad you wrote this book. Like, this is not just about people. Listen to me, okay? This is not just about sensuality. It covers so many different layers. There's so many things that it touches on.
It's really good, y'all. Like, when I was editing it, I was like, wow, I really wrote the shit out this book. This book is really good. And
you did what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, the ebook is available. If you prefer the audiobook, my therapist read the foreword, but I read the rest of it. And I don't just talk, y'all. Like, I give you energy.
Yeah, it's energy. I actually listened to the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook while reading the book.
My audiobook.
As you should.
As I should.
Because there's so much language in here, so much you really let your voice pop out in the writing. And as I wrote it, or as I read it, that's in my head, that's how you literally said it in the audiobook.
Yeah.
So all the accents and all the hyphens and all the, it all shows up.
And I love that. And that's why we want more books written by Black women and femmes, by Black men, by queer folks, because our voices just ring different.
It do.
And it's going to resonate differently with people. So, yeah.
Yeah, so when you open this book and the author's note say, "Hey, boo."
Hey, boo.
She talking to you.
You know I'm talking to you.
She talking to you. So just check out the book. It's available everywhere. Is there a preferred way that you want people to get it?
You know, the behemoth online, I know they're demonic, right? Because they just taken over everything. But the fact of the matter is, when you leave a review on Amazon, it actually pushes the book into the algorithm and helps spread the word. And so, honestly, if you purchase from Amazon, leave a review on Amazon. But otherwise, support your local bookstores and order it and ask them to order it and all that kind of jazz.
Cool beans, cool beans.
Yes.
Well, have a good flight.
Thank
have a good
you.
night.
If you're in Houston, if you're in or near Houston, I'm going to be in Houston tomorrow at Kindred Stories, a Black woman-owned bookstore. Come 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to be having a Sensual Faith combo, and I'll be signing books. So if you're in town, come through.
Houston, H-Town, pull up.
H-Town is going down.
All right. Thank you so much again for your working with this, and I look forward to every time you come on. It's always, the energy is great, and it's always good vibes, and I just love talking to you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And when I'm in Chicago, I'm going to come say what's up to you in Rose.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely.
Amazing. Good night, my dear. Peace,
Have
y'all.
a good night.
Peace.
Y'all, this is the work. This is really exciting. Like, I feel so full. Will there be a recording? I think we should be able to get access to these live streams, and then I can download it somehow. I have to look into that, but I will try to, if not post the full video, post clips that we talked about. Book is purchased. That's amazing. See, we got people purchasing the book. I'm telling you, this book, it's she really walks you through. You don't get to the things that would make you feel like clutch as pearls until later on in the book. And I think that's really on purpose, because she knows the audience that she's writing to. She knows the background, and she's, providing a path for you to walk through. And again, it's not just information. It is affirmations. It is journal prompts. It is praxis, things you can do to begin implementing these practices, to begin rethinking how you think about your body and about sexuality and about pleasure and things like that. I'm really inspired by and proud of, and et cetera, about the Black women that are really reimagining and asking the questions that they've historically asked. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think about Jarena Lee, a Black woman in the 1800s, who's saying, like, hey, y'all say a woman can't preach, but why can't I? I'm a woman, like, and I'm created in God's image. So there's a history of Black women asking quote unquote indecent questions, right? There's a way that there's a history behind that. Because again, Black women don't have the luxury of not interrogating these things, especially when they are the ones the ones that are being harmed. So yeah, and I think Lyvonne's work is just a continuation of that tradition. All right. Have a good night, y'all.